This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Energy for Enlightenment. Or at least that was the title which went out in the publicity. That was before I'd prepared the talk. So, as often happens, the talk's gone in a bit of a different direction to what I originally had in mind. So it may be more appropriate to call it Glimpses of Enlightenment or Seeds of Enlightenment. But one of the things I wanted to do with this talk is I wanted to talk about enlightenment because this is a celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. Often talks at Buddha Day talk about the Buddha's life story, the Buddha's experience of enlightenment, touching the earth, the defeat of Mara and so on. But actually, in fact, I'm going to say very little about those things and about the Buddha. And my purpose is to try and make the idea of enlightenment, the word enlightenment, a bit more accessible, a bit more approachable, bring it down to earth a bit. So I'm not going to be talking too metaphysically about it. I'm not going to talk about ineffable enlightenment or distinguishing between nirvana and samyak sambodhi. I'm going to try and make it, hopefully a bit more relevant. So, we will, over the course of the weekend, we will have some of the Buddha's enlightenment story in the pujas, in readings and enactments in the pujas, and also probably, I hope, from Shraddadi's talk tomorrow morning. When I was young and foolish, or perhaps I should say young and naive, I think I was in my late teens, or maybe 20, can't really remember, but I read a book on Zen, and again I can't remember which one. I guess overall it didn't have a big impact on me. But in this book it seemed to suggest that Satori, or awakening, or a moment of enlightenment, an enlightening moment, could happen at any time. Could happen even in the midst of some ordinary activity, such as, and it used this example, getting on or off a bus. So, being rather foolish, as I say, or being naive, and tending to take things a bit literally, I spent the next, week or so, after I'd read this, travelling about London doing whatever I was doing, which involved bus journeys, and I would get on or off buses with a sense of eager anticipation, thinking that maybe this was going to be the big moment. That big moment, transformative moment, when the bus, myself, other passengers, and the world in general would suddenly become changed in some way, transformed, or perceived differently. I didn't really know what it would be. But I looked forward to this occurrence. Of course, it didn't happen. And what I didn't understand at that time was that Satori, or awakening, could indeed come about during any situation, even quite a mundane situation. But it would only come about in the context of a life dedicated to spiritual practice, especially meditation. I think actually it's possible for enlightening moments or moments of awakening to occur out of the blue in other contexts. But I don't think it's so likely. I think the most likely thing is that we create a context of spiritual practice, and by doing that we're setting up the conditions for awakening or enlightenment to arise. Many years later, when I was ordained and given the name Bodhivajra, one of the things that Bhante Sangharakshita said about my name was that it was a reminder that enlightenment, or Bodhi, doesn't just happen. You have to put energy, or Vajra, into bringing it about. maybe Bhante thought that I in particular needed reminding of this point. It's no good waiting for something to happen just because we want it to happen. Ages ago, someone asked me about the process of writing music. That's something that I spend quite a bit of time doing. They said to me, did I just wait for inspiration and then all I would have to do was write it down? And I said, no, not at all. If I did it like that, I'd be waiting forever. Because in my experience, things don't appear out of the blue just like that. I have to work in order to bring them about. So in the process of creating music, I have to spend hours sitting at the piano, trying things out, experimenting. And sometimes I get ideas from that. Sometimes I come up with something in the course of an improvisation which I like, or I think can be crafted into something more finished. So then I've got something to work on. So work or putting effort into something, putting energy into something, creates the conditions for something else to arise. But what is it that draws us to Buddhism? What is it that draws us to the figure of the Buddha? We're like young plants that reach for the sun, wanting nourishment, light, warmth. As human beings, we suffer, but we don't want to suffer. We feel trapped, but of course we want to be free. We hate, even though perhaps we'd rather love. We grasp on to things and people and states of mind, rather than just letting them be. The Buddha, who was a human being like all of us, knew all of this pain of existence very well from his own experience. And his eventual enlightenment represents all of the things that we want in our heart of hearts. That, I think, is why we're drawn to Buddhahood. That's why we recognise something about Buddhism when we come to it. Sometimes people say that they feel like they've arrived home when they encounter the Dharma. It's because we encounter something that we recognise, even if only we recognise it as a faint glimmer or response in our heart. It's because it represents what our heart desires. It represents the opposite of suffering. It represents our desire for freedom, for truth, to live compassionately, or whatever way we like to describe the qualities of Buddhahood. And these positive desires or aspirations, they can find expression in all sorts of ways, not necessarily just in being drawn to the Buddha and the Dharma. For example, we may find ourselves strongly drawn towards writing or painting or music or any of the arts as a means of expressing our longing for freedom, or as a way of finding some relief from painful experience, as though through the media of the arts we can create another world or another way of being, even if only temporarily. And through the creation of whatever that work is, that piece of music or that painting or whatever, we also create ourself. The process of making that object, if I can call it that, the process of doing that also creates or recreates something in ourself, transforms our mind. Or perhaps we're drawn to another person who seems to possess some of the qualities that we would like. Perhaps this other person is fearless, or just downright honest, or unflappable. They don't get upset like we do. And we're drawn to them because of that. They represent our heart's desire. Perhaps again we're motivated to do a particular kind of job because we're aware of suffering in the world, and we want to do anything we can to help alleviate it. Becoming maybe a doctor or a social worker, something like that, which is a way of trying to realise our dream of a world without suffering. I write music and I play music, and both of these activities involve creativity and communication. I write music because I want to articulate my dreams of a happier way of being, I guess. And also, when I play music with others, it's a way of realising my dream, at least to some extent, of being more deeply connected with people. Not isolated or separate. So it's a way of overcoming loneliness, at least temporarily. I think all of these things that we do are, and there are many others as well, other examples, all of them are ways of connecting with what deep down we want. And as such, we could say that they are echoes or intuitions or seeds of enlightenment. But there are other motivations too, based on what we don't want. One of my reasons for practicing is to do with death. I recognise my fear of death, my anxiety about it, the number of times that I've imagined in my mind how my death might be. Whether it would be violent and painful, whether it would be a lingering death, would I be able to have any control over my mental states at that time? All unknown. I don't want to go through death's door, kicking and struggling, if I can help it. I'd like to be able to approach it with equanimity and a sense, maybe even a sense of curiosity or adventure. This moving into the unknown. It's an important part of my practice, and it's a desire to emulate the Buddha and those great Buddhist practitioners who have been able to move from what we call life into what we call death, with a complete acceptance of what is happening. Milarepa comes to my mind in this context as well. He was one of the greatest practitioners from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And when he was a young man, he killed a number of people out of revenge for mistreatment of his family. And later, well, when he was still young, but he experienced great remorse and also a terrible fear of the suffering that he would have to go through as a consequence of these actions of his. So he desperately wanted the Dharma. He desperately wanted a teacher. He desperately wanted to gain enlightenment. And that's what he did. He found the perfect teacher, and he was able to engage with the practice, and he succeeded in gaining enlightenment in this lifetime. He still had to experience the painful consequences of those actions, but it was undertaken in a particular way through the guidance of his teacher, rather than spending years or aeons in some kind of self-created hell realm. Enlightenment is the goal of a Buddhist. Or is it? Is it our goal? Can we honestly say that that is our reason for practicing, our motivation? Do we even have a goal of any sort? What do we dream of? What is our heart's desire? Do we just want to be just a little bit happier? Just a little bit free of stress, but still carry on much the same way as we always have done? Or are we prepared to go the whole way and gain complete freedom, get to a point where we still perhaps experience the discomforts and the sufferings of being human, but those things no longer cause us any problem whatsoever. We're completely free from those things. We don't very often talk about enlightenment, I don't think. There's a good reason for that. It's really hard to talk about it. It's very hard to describe. Impossible even. Perhaps it's not a word that appeals to us very much. Maybe we prefer awakening or words such as freedom, compassion, wisdom, understanding, energy, tranquility, equanimity, creativity, happiness. Any of these qualities, but in great abundance, inexhaustible. Just part of our experience all of the time. Sometimes enlightenment is described in terms of what it is not. For example, enlightenment means no longer revolving around the wheel of life, not being caught up in cyclic conditionality. It is not based in greed, hatred, or delusion. The Pali word nibbana, or Sanskrit nirvana, means extinction. But that doesn't mean that we become extinct, we cease to exist. It just means that we extinguish the burning flames of conditioned existence. We burn up the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. Elsewhere in the Pali Canon, enlightenment is described as uncreated, unending, uncompounded, indiscernible. So, in a sense, it's unknown. In a big sense, it's very unknown. The actual experience is unknown. René Char, the French poet, said that we must always live with the image of the unknown before our eyes. We must always live with the image of the unknown before our eyes. Well, you might ask, if the thing is unknown, how can we have an image of it? But in a way, that's the whole point. We're trying to continually create or recreate this image. We're trying to track this image with our mind. We're trying to bring it into being. This is what an artist or musician does when they create something. They have a sense, perhaps in their mind's eye or in their mind's ear, of what it is they want to bring into being. And they stay with that until something comes out at the other end of the process. And as soon as they've done that, they get another image of the unknown and they start pursuing that one and create something else. There's no end to creativity. When we do a visualization meditation, which many of us do already, all the members do, and in fact we're going to do one later today. We're going to do a visualization meditation involving imagining the qualities of the Buddha. But when we do these kind of meditations, this is part of what we are doing. We're seeing in our mind's eye an image of the Buddha, or Bodhisattva. We're seeing, imagining the Buddha's qualities. We're trying to bring those qualities into being. In fact, I think whatever meditation we're doing, maybe you could stretch it a bit and say, whatever spiritual practice we're doing, if we've got this image of the unknown before our eyes, then we are trying to we're trying to bring about this quality of being, which we could call enlightenment, or we could call it whatever we like, really. But this is what we're trying to bring about. So any kind of spiritual practice, when we engage with that, when we engage with the pursuit of the image of the unknown, then you could say that we're rehearsing our own enlightenment. We're rehearsing, we're preparing for our enlightenment, or we're beginning to establish the conditions which will bring about the arising of our awakening. Enlightenment is really beyond words, the experience is, and it's beyond rational comprehension. All of the words I used just now, uncreated, uncompounded, unknown, etc., are negatives. None of them say what enlightenment is, only what it is not. Even the positives I mentioned just now, freedom, compassion, energy, and so on, they don't quite tell us what enlightenment might really be like. They're just hints or fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. Because enlightenment is beyond words, it's experience. So in a way, we can't even talk about it at all, although we do, and I am. This reminds me of two stories concerning musicians. The first of them is a story about Chopin, who was probably the greatest pianist and composer of piano music. And there was an occasion where he played a new composition to a friend of his. And afterwards the friend said, well, that was very lovely, that's great. But what was it all about? And Chopin said, oh, didn't you get it? I'll play it again. So that suggests that he didn't want to talk about the music in any other terms other than the music. He didn't want to get drawn into a particular story about how the music came to be created or what each different part of the music was supposed to represent. So, in other words, just listen to the experience. If you immerse yourself in the music, then you will understand it. You will get a taste of it, even a strong taste. And the other story concerns Thelonious Monk, who was a jazz pianist and composer. And a journalist once asked him to talk about his music. And Thelonious Monk just dismissed that as ridiculous. And he said, talking about music is like dancing about architecture. So, if we can't talk about it, how can we relate to it or connect with it? Enlightenment, I mean. I think that we've all had experiences of enlightenment in the form of hints or echoes or glimpses or intuitions. I mean, actual experiences we've had which suggest to us another possibility, another way of being, another way of living our lives, other qualities. For example, maybe we've had a particular time when we've been inspired, uplifted, expanded, broken out of our usual negative preoccupations, and temporarily at least we've experienced some relief from suffering, some relief from the binding nature of a fixed self-view. Listening to music can help us access this kind of feeling. It can free us in the moment from anxiety. It can help us relax into a bigger space. Those times when we've been on retreat, and something so simple as standing outside doing nothing in particular, maybe with a mug of tea in hand, and hearing the sound of geese flying over, looking up, watching them, and our awareness can just transform that situation into something wonderful, so that our mind, in that moment, becomes integrated with the whole scene. Magic moments like this change the ordinary into the extraordinary, due to the quality of awareness that we bring to the situation. Or maybe we've had some experience, I'm sure we all have had this, some experience of being in a challenging situation, meeting the challenge, and going beyond ourselves, overcoming the fear, and enjoying the freedom that can bring about. These experiences, however, they do not last. They're dependent on particular conditions. But how would it be if they did last? Or better still, how would it be if we had continual and varied experiences of this nature, just one after the other, all these wonderful experiences? Ordinary, but extraordinary. We can recognise these experiences perhaps as echoes or glimpses of enlightenment. We can recognise that we can and do have ordinary yet transformative experiences. In his book Living with Awareness, Sangharakshita says, imagine a day of unfettered inspiration and free-flowing energy. A whole day of it. A day in which you are able to be completely true and clear in your communication. A day in which you felt so real a connection with others that your own concerns ceased to loom so balefully over your life. A day in which you never felt as though you were banging your head against a brick wall or getting stuck in a rut. Imagine such a day of creative freedom, and then imagine that freedom doubled or trebled and continuing to expand, and you will start to get an idea of the nature of enlightenment. When Bhante gave me my name, another thing that he said about it was that enlightenment, or Bodhi, was not an anemic or passive state, but a full-blooded, dynamic Vajra state. But not even a state really, but rather a continually unfolding, full-blooded and dynamic process. Perhaps enlightenment isn't necessarily a big dramatic experience or event. Perhaps it's more of an unfolding, a gradual coming closer to reality, gradually living our life more in accord with what our deep heart tells us is the way to be. A gradual softening of the boundaries that separate us, and a relaxation into expansiveness. Our heart yearns for freedom, kindness, understanding, and so on. And if we practice the path, then we gradually come to live these things. The more I practice, the more I get a sense of the path being the goal. There's nowhere really to get to. There's just opening up into one's experience and relaxing into that bigger space. Engaging with the path means unfolding into the goal. Engaging means the Vajra dynamic energy that we bring to it, and unfolding means the Padma, or lotus, or receptive or open quality that we bring. I'd like to talk now a bit about awakening through the body. So in my own experience, I have a strong need, a strong feeling that I need to be more grounded. I have a lot of air energy, but not enough earth energy sometimes. I need to inhabit my physical experience, not just meditating or living from here upwards in my head. I need to unravel tensions in my body. I need to get to know what my body is telling me about how I am and who I am. The body can tell us both. We talk about body language. It's sort of a popular phrase, isn't it? Where we think we can learn something about somebody by the way they look, by the way they move, by the way they hold their body. And of course that's true, we can observe things. But we also need to study our own body language, perhaps from the inside. What is our body telling us? I sometimes feel anxiety in my guts, really strong churning experience in the guts. Or I experience hard knots in my shoulder, to do with fear, anxiety. So if I go deeply enough into those experiences, those feelings in the guts and in the shoulders, or in the neck it might be, if I go deeply enough into those, then I start to get a sense of actually I'm creating that. I'm doing the holding on. It's not something that happens to me. It's not just it's not just something that's happened to me that I can't do anything about. I can get to a point with deeper awareness where I start to perceive that yes, I'm doing the holding here. And once I get to that point, then it becomes possible to let go. It may not happen immediately, it may take a bit of time, but it is possible. But it only comes through a deep awareness, really going into the sensations in the body, those particular experiences. Also, I look for contentment and spaciousness in my body. If life is busy and a lot of things happening, such as when I was preparing for this weekend, for example, my head just wanted to think about the weekend all the time and do things that had to be done, including preparing this talk. But at the same time, I knew that wasn't good for me. So I had to be looking for spaciousness and contentment, being where I was at the time in my body. I think contentment is something that I often find just through the physical posture, sitting in meditation in particular. I find if I'm comfortable in my body, comfortable on the seat, then I can develop contentment within the body. And then that affects everything else. Contentment is present. Contentment is the greatest wealth, as it says in the Dhammapada. I have a need to feel embodied in the ways that I've just talked about, and I have a need to feel part of the natural world. If I'm separated from the natural world, living in a digital or estranged world, then it's not very pleasant. I feel unconnected, disconnected. When I connect more with the natural world, it's like connecting with people. Well, it's just a connection. What more can I say about it? It means there's less of a separation between self and other. One reason I love doing yoga is that it brings me right into my body. It makes me feel embodied and alive in a very complete sort of way. It brings me back home to myself. I have the feeling when that happens that nothing is missing now. I'm okay. I don't need anything else. I have all I need. And this means that my mind becomes clearer and less cluttered. In recent years, through doing yoga, I've actually had a number of realizations about myself and about how my mind works. I'll just mention one of these as an example of what I'm talking about. This was to do with craving, an experience of craving which I became aware of in my experience. A fairly subtle form of craving. It wasn't really gross craving, but it was there, present in my experience. And it came about at the end of an early morning yoga class. I was lying there in relaxation, and I became aware that part of me was looking elsewhere for the relaxation, looking for something. I seemed to have this idea that there'd be some other deeper, fuller, better, more complete, more satisfying state of relaxation. But then I suddenly woke up to the fact that I was already doing it. I was already in a state of relaxation. This was it. I didn't need to look anywhere else. There was no other, better state. All I had to do was let go of that idea. So then I was able just to experience the pleasure of the relaxation, of being content in the body, of being present in the body. And that happened early in the morning. And for the rest of that day and into the next day, I was much more aware of subtle craving going on in my mind. The desire for this, desire for that, not wanting this, not wanting the other. But in the recognition came the letting go and a sense of being okay with how I was. So what I mean by that is that it didn't really bother me that this craving was present, because I was right there seeing it. And as soon as it arose, it moved on again. So it wasn't a problem. But most of the time we're not aware of craving. A lot of the time I'm not aware of craving. So then we feel the need to pursue it. What remains to be sought? Nirvana is clear before one. This very place, the lotus paradise. This very body, the Buddha. As it says in Hakuin's Song of Meditation. Our experience is our experience. There is nothing else to look for. We just need to perceive it, accept it, recognize it without distortion. Body awareness is so important in every aspect of life. This very body is the Buddha. This very body can become the Buddha. Going right back to the time of the Buddha, his teaching of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, this points us right to the importance of the body, because mindfulness of the body is the first of these 4 foundations, and it includes all aspects of physical experience, including awareness of the breath, of bodily organs, of sensations or felt experience, awareness of solidity and fluidity in the body, being aware of the 4 postures: standing, lying down, sitting and walking. These are, of course, very ordinary experiences, but the purpose of maintaining awareness of them is to understand our experience more deeply, to gain insight into impermanence and insubstantiality. For example, we may feel craving or anger and feel it in the body as bodily sensations. Now, if we can stay in the body, remain connected with those sensations, then the anger or craving will pass, because we'll just perceive them as sensations which arise and then pass away. So in that way, we can just simply see the arising and passing of things, which is impermanence, and we can also see that those sensations do not have any real or lasting substance. So we can't define ourselves in terms of being angry or of wanting something. It's not relevant anymore. So in this way, we not only gain some valuable insight, but we also experience happiness in the form of freedom from hanging on to those negative emotions. Attainment of enlightenment is then a gradual process, one of repeatedly overcoming Mara, who represents obstacles and hindrances. When the Buddha touched the earth just before his enlightenment, in response to Mara's challenge, the earth goddess appeared and witnessed that the Buddha had indeed practiced over many lifetimes, and certainly in his present lifetime. So when the Mara of doubt appears in our practice and challenges us by saying things like, "I'm no good at meditating, I might as well just give up now," or "I don't think I'll bother with this spiritual life, things are okay to stay as they are," or "Who wants enlightenment anyway, why bother?" So whatever challenge Mara might present to us, we can respond by touching the earth of our own experience in 2 ways. We can call to mind our heart's desire, which can refuel our desire for awakening, for freedom, for truth. And we can also look to our past meditation experience. Think of all the struggles, all the moments of awareness, all the effort that we've put in over months or years, all the accumulated merit that we've gained from this. And in doing this, we tap into our stream of practice, and we can gain confidence from that momentum, confidence that yes, we can sit on this seat, on this Vajrasana, and we can unfold or progress towards enlightenment. So, activate your Vajra, open into enlightenment, and be alive to possibilities when getting on and off buses.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you